everybody, this is Eve West. Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel. This channel is dedicated to promoting a book I wrote. It's called Follow. In my last video, I talked about how my book deals with a holistic view of spirituality, looking at it not just from a purely psychological, spiritual, so-called spiritual aspect of a human being, and conceptual aspect about love, caring, and sharing, and things like that, but also about the earthly aspect of a human being. And so the earthly aspect deals with the reptilian brain, which you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. And so I talk about how this matrix environment, or whatever, that our consciousness is placed within. It's not really an environment, but the altered reality that our consciousness is placed within, which is called a matrix, actually is designed to prevent us from finding union with our earthly reptilian brain self. And so every time we reincarnate, this reptilian aspect of us gets, taken away, and our melanin gets extracted out until we become a master race of super duper blonde, super duper, blue-eyed people, if you will, as we're continuously, reincarnate through the matrix system. And so, we become less human. And so when you see the word human, you see the word hue. And so when you don't have a hue, the less of a hue you have, the less human you are. And so my book really, looks at the various constructs of the matrix, such as the family structure, the government structure itself, media and entertainment, religion, all these various aspects, if you will, education, and how they actually work to solidify the false ego and also to separate the ego from the astral body. So it's like separating the ego or the conscious mind from the unconscious mind. If you would like to purchase Follow, there's a link in the description to purchase it on Amazon.com under the Kindles tab. It's called, the book is called Follow, and it's by Eve West. And so it's an ebook, actually. And so depending upon the following that it gets, I will go ahead and publish an actual physical copy of the book. But I just want to see, what people really think about it, in terms of, how they feel that it's something that's useful. My book is, it's like a Merkaba, and so when you think of a Merkaba, you don't think about a linear frame of thought. A Merkaba can actually process information from many different angles and perspectives. And so, my book kind of reads a little bit like the Bible. People typically don't read the Bible from beginning to end. And so you can pick my book up at any place or any part and still be able to read it and understand it. So it's not one of those books, if you will, because, people get intimidated because the book is really long. So as an ebook, it's like, it's over 869 pages or something like that. Actually, since the first edition, it's probably longer now. So it's probably over 900 pages. As an ebook, but don't get frightened, if you will, by that, because you can just pick it up anywhere and look at a topic that interests you and explore that topic. I think that when you when you look at certain things, and you look at something that interests you, it's yourself calling you to that particular thing. So let the book call you to whatever you feel it's leading you to, if you will. But definitely have a gift of discernment. Reading the book is a very controversial book. And the book does not feel good to read as an ego. You're not going to feel good reading my book as ego. I don't even feel good as an ego reading my book. It deals with a lot of super duper occult information. And so whenever you're dealing with the occult, your ego will become frightened, if you will, because, it wants to keep you functioning at the reptilian brain, which you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. And so whenever you start to discover the so-called kundalini, or your earthly sacral, starts to awaken, and you really start to reach knowledge, it's very difficult to hold on to the body, because you are getting into slower brainwave frequencies. That's why when people, when they're dead, you see a flat line, if you will. The New Age doesn't teach you this, but from an occult standpoint, whenever you're getting to slower brainwave frequencies, you're getting closer to death. So when you're getting into your theta, and definitely delta, that's the closest to death, and then you die. And so my book is really about, I guess in a way, kind of like the Book of the Dead. It's a way of transitioning from, the physical into the metaphysical. into bridging the two, the gaps, the gap between the two. So anywho, my last video talked more so about, just the overview of the book, and just wanted to get you kind of acclimated to that. But in this particular video, I'm going to talk a little bit about, what I would consider to be Antichrist, the Antichrist, and talk about my handler from the astral realm, which is King James of Scotland. And so, when people think of the Antichrist or what have you, when you break down words, like for example, anti means against, right? Anti means against. And so, anti means against Christ, if you will, that the prefix anti means against. And so, against Christ means against life, because really Christ represents life. And so the Antichrist is about death. The Antichrist is about death. It's about balancing the equation. Because you first had life, now you must have death. And so within Christianity, which is based on paganism, if you research it, it is the dichotomy of Alpha and Omega. And so the Alpha and Omega in Christian theology actually is life and death. That's pretty much what it is. I'm the beginning, which is life, and I'm the end, which is death. And so this is the reincarnate, the whole system of the reincarnation system, to have life and to have death. And so the purpose is to actually have life, if you will, to escape the reincarnation system and stop reincarnating into the system as a rainbow child or whatever, or whatever they call it in the New Age, or a child of the zodiac. Every time we reincarnate, we reincarnate as an avatar of the zodiac. And so the thing is that, depending upon how much melanin you have, if you don't have the melanin content, which is, connected to the third eye, then you will continue to stay looped within the wheel of rebirth or reincarnation, playing avatars from the zodiac and not really realizing your true divinity. And so, my particular consciousness is at a crossroads here, because I don't really have very much melanin content left. So because of that, in my next incarnation, I'm supposed to be a beautiful mulatto. However, I will be really dumb and stupid, and will not be able to recognize the illusion, the fact that my consciousness is really caught within an illusion. And this is considered a dream, what they consider to be dream or Maya or what have you. Many people identify with their horoscope, right? With their zodiac sign. And so there's a reason for that, because the zodiac signs are actually coffins. You're born into a coffin or a sarcophagus or whatever, a body, a mind. And so they give you someone to play here. And so, the whole point is to rise above your avatar, the actress or actor that you're playing, and to know that it's just a part, that it's not you, and to know that there's no karma, really. Everything is bound by what they call the Akashic record, which is a recording of, a record of all of your thoughts, actions, and emotions that you'll have throughout your incarnation. Is referred to as the Book of Life and the Book of Revelation. This is why the Bible is written in Scripture. It's a script. And so it's up to you to actually determine that you are not the script. And so when you give up the mind and body, the people that create this hellhole, I call for the Jews, I call them the Lords of Karma. Karma just means cause and effect. They want your reality to look like cause and effect. They design it very well. It's very foolproof, if you will, to look like cause and effect. But they want to blame you at judgment, and tell you that you didn't do something, or you did do something that you weren't supposed to, and so you need to go back into the reincarnation system to get it right another time around. But really, to be honest with you, they just designed this to look like like guilt, to actually impose guilt upon you. But, no one should feel guilty for anything that is thought, said, or done within the matrix, because this is an illusion. Only a dark being would judge an illusion. If someone is judging you for illusions, then you know that you know, you're in trouble, if you will, because, and they're not truly a god. They're a devil, actually, or a demon. And so, you know, this video really is to talk a little bit about my demon, actually. And so the thing is that, you know, I talked in my last video how there's two yous. There's an ego, and there is an astral, or unconscious. So there's a conscious and unconscious mind. And so the unconscious aspect of you is what you go to at night when you go to sleep. Like I said, when you go to sleep, you're not a man, you're not a woman, you're not rich, you're not poor, you're not black, you're not white, you're no one. You shed your concept of the matrix and you work out your restrictions that you had in physicality. But on that realm, you are owned by people, by the people who create this construct. Okay? And so that is who you would call a handler. And so the handler is an elite. And so the elite are, you know, people who have money. You know, the elite are people who are Satanists, well, yeah, they're called Satanists, I would call them, because they are totally dominated by Saturn, by the material and time. And so that's how they actually control this whole matrix system through, you know, Satanism, Saturn, through material and through time. And so, you know, the elite that owns this is King James of Scotland. And so, within this matrix environment, you know, he has designed it foolproof to have me reincarnate, so I can lose my more of my melanin and to be dominated by my pituitary gland, as opposed to having union between my pituitary and my pineal gland. And so, you know, you gain Christ consciousness when the oil actually ascends up your spine, uniting the pineal and the pituitary gland together. So you have Christ consciousness, so you have the ability to consciously manifest at will. In the physical, actually, you can actually physically, you can manifest at will in the physical if you have uniting between your pituitary and your pineal gland. However, the way that the matrix system is designed is you die and then you go to heaven. You die and then you go to heaven. So heaven is you're playing your pituitary aspect of yourself, which is the reptilian brain. So you're only bound by what you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. You don't have any love. You don't have any sensitivity, if you will. You know, in heaven, the nerve is cut. That's why they call in heaven, what is it? Some religions or doctrines, they call it nirvana. I think Buddhism calls it nirvana when you go to heaven. And so nirvana is when your nerve is cut. Nirvana is when your nerve is cut. And so really it's like the synaptic nerve is disabled, and you're able just to kind of do what you want to do without any judgment. You don't really feel bad about it. You don't have a heart. And so there's a problem with that. Whenever you leave your body and you go to heaven, you eventually come back to earth, or to hell in this case, because the earthly aspect of my being has devolved to a hellish state. But you come back to hell. You come back to hell because within heaven you reach a point of stasis, I call it. And so in heaven you can do whatever you want, and everyone just bends to who you are and what you want. And you know, that type of existence is quite boring. It's boring. And so you're going to want some balance or resistance. And so that's why you reincarnate back. And so you keep within the reincarnation system, if you think about it in terms of the celestial universe, which is an illusion. But for the sake of, you know, speaking, you know, you keep going back between the moon, which is the unconscious, or heaven, all right? Because the moon is heaven, or or hell, or the sun, if you will, celestial wise. And the sun is your consciousness, is your conscious ego, which you're aware of. So you keep going back and forth. You know, you die, you go live on the moon, you know, and so the moon comes out at night, it's your unconscious, your reptilian self. You know, that's why people say, you know, when crazy things happen, it's a full moon. So you live on the moon. You live on the moon at night, but in a way. But, you know, when you wake up, you are bound by the sun. So you are, you know, a child of the sun, because you're a child of your awareness. You're aware and you're conscious of things. And so there's light there. And so this was the purpose, or this is, I should say, the purpose of my handler. My handler has designed me to keep going back and forth between the moon and the sun. And so this is definitely a slave mentality. This is a slave mentality. And so, at the end of my incarnation, I'm due to have a conversation, if you will, with the King James of Scotland, who is my God. I guess you would call is my God or my Lord, if you will. And so, I will be basically asked by King James of Scotland, for my soul, if you will. So I can go play on the moon and then eventually reincarnate back to Earth, and or I should say to hell. And when I reincarnate back to hell, I will not have the awareness because I'll have less melanin, and I won't be able to go through my incarnation with any knowledge. And so I'll be honest, given all the hell that I've been through, if I didn't have any type of if I didn't have the melanin content, I would not be sitting in front of you right now doing this video. And so going through crucifixion, or what they would consider to be awakening, is a very torturous ordeal, if you will. And so I wouldn't have been able to survive if I didn't have the melanin content to, stimulated by the pineal gland to see past the constructs of the matrix, and how, regardless of what, I am not, I'm not sinful or guilty for anything. And so the whole purpose of King James of Scotland, who is the Antichrist, so if you want to know who the Antichrist is, it's the King James of Scotland. That is the elite that they plan on bringing in as the Antichrist, to basically take over this this one mind, this pineal gland that projects this seeming world. And so they're gearing up for him. And so when you look at, like, for example, you see the Pope in his auditorium hall. They have it set up like a reptile. And so when as you see the people sitting in the auditorium hall, it looks like the reptile, because the architecture is like, the reptile is behind the people and the people are sitting in the chairs in front of it. It looks like the reptile is eating the people. And also too, behind the Pope on the stage, there's like some type of like thing where, Jesus is coming out of some type of nuclear blast or something like that. The Antichrist is Satan, and Satan is a reptile. Satan is what you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. So they're bringing in the Antichrist, which is King James of Scotland. And the thing about King James of Scotland that I want it to be made known is King James of Scotland is gay. King James of Scotland is gay. Now, the thing is that, I've graduated from looking at things from the level of the physical. And so when I say King James of Scotland is gay, I don't really, focus so much on the, because within the within the historical account of King James of Scotland, it's recorded that that he's gay, that he likes men. And I don't think anything's wrong with that superficially. The problem I have with my handler, King James of Scotland, is that he likes reptiles. He prefers men in a sense where he prefers a reptile, someone who's dominated by the reptilian brain, which you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. And so King James of Scotland is not about marrying a woman, or in other words, marrying a Jew. King James of Scotland is what you would consider to be Hitler. He hates Jews. And so when you look at the metaphysics of what a Jew is, I don't want people to think of a Jew as someone who, I don't want people to think of a Jew as like the people we see on TV, whatever, in Israel. No, a Jew is a woman. A Jew is a woman, because a woman is not a man. If you look at the word woman, you see man in woman. And so a woman has not just the pituitary aspect as a man does, but a woman also has the pineal gland. And so they have, a Jew has the intersecting triangles of both the masculine and the feminine. And so this is God status. This is God. And so King James of Scotland is threatened by Jews. he is threatened by God. He does not want a God. He wants to be God. And so since he wants to be God, he does not want to be, I guess what you would call, dominated by a Jew. He does not want someone who has knowledge. He wants to be the one who has knowledge. And so therefore he is antichrist, or against Christ, or against life. And so in a way you could say that he's spiritually gay. He is trying to become something that he's not. So he is a man, right? He's a reptile, but he wants to be a woman. He wants to be a woman. He wants to have, if you will, both the pineal and the pituitary aspect for himself. He doesn't want to find union with a woman. He wants to be a woman. And so that's why the Antichrist is oftentimes said to be a homosexual. So, you know, in a way, he's a homosexual, but not in a physical sense. Like I said, everything in the physical when it comes to the Matrix is a perversion, if you will. So when I talk about homosexuality, I'm talking about it more metaphysically. You know, he does not want to be one with a black woman. You know, he hates black people. You know, you can think of King James of Scotland as Hitler. You know, he, with the reincarnation system and taking out the melanin, because he is the god of this world. He is Satan. You know, he purposely, you know, tries to change things at the atomic level to basically, get I guess what you call an effect, or get a desired effect, if you will. And so, I want to put that out there about King James of Scotland and the fact that he's a reptile, and the reptile hall for, you know, at the Vatican represents him. And also too, you know, there are certain things that are put into pop culture and things like that that are that represent King James of Scotland, and basically how they plan on bringing him in as the Antichrist. So, you know, for example, you know, when you look at certain music, you know, especially hip hop music and things like that, if you look at the song Ape Shit by Beyonce and her husband Jay-Z, they're called the Carters. This video actually represents the Antichrist, bringing in the Antichrist. In fact, it said when in the song, when she says, "Give me that vitamin D." Vitamin D means the sun. That's the vitamin that you get from the sun. So she's talking about the sun. In that video, you look when it shows Virgo, and it shows that, you know, because people may say, well, you know, Beyonce is a Virgo, but when you see that Virgo is highlighted within that video, that particular star constellation looks like a person giving birth to a sun. And so this is giving birth to the dark sun. This is giving birth to the reptile. That's what they plan on doing. And bringing in the Antichrist. Because when you look at the star constellation, if you connect the dots, it looks like the sun is coming through the legs of Virgo. So, you know, Beyonce is giving birth to the Antichrist. You know, one thing I want to mention too, you know, is melanin. Because like I said, King James of Scotland is a racist and does not like black people, does not like Jews. And so when you think of, you know, Jews, you think of black people. The more melanin you have, or the more human you are, the closer you are to your Jew heritage. The less melanin you have, you become Jewish, if you will. So if you look at that suffix ish, means, you know, you are, you know, you're Jewish. You're not a Jew. And so, you know, the more hue you have, the darker you are, the more you are a Jew. And so when we see the spectrum of black women who are Jews, dancing provocatively, if you will, in front of the picture of, I think it's Napoleon about to crown his wife in front of the Pope or something like that. But you can see that, you know, Beyonce in a way is being crowned, you know, if you will, because eventually she will give birth to the Antichrist in the next incarnation, which is a reptile that is absent of the pineal gland. And so, you know, just trying to think of some things within that video that really sheds light, besides the fact that she's mentioned vitamin D and that, Virgo, is the constellation that gives birth to the sun, and the spectrum of hues, and how, the more hue you have, the more you are a Jew, connected to your Jew heritage, because, melanin and the pineal gland go hand in hand. When she, at the beginning of the video, when she mentions, give me my check, this is Judas. When she says, give me my check, put some respect on my check, she is talking to the Christ. She is talking to the Christ to sell his soul, so that they can bring in the Antichrist. Because if you look at, in the Bible, certain stories like Judas and Jesus, Judas sells Jesus out for money. And so, in order for them to get to the Antichrist, Jesus, the Christ, must sell himself out, if you will, as Judas, as a Judas type figure. So you can think of Jesus and Judas as the same person. But Jesus, so basically, if you look at the Gnostic text of the Gospel of Judas, you will see that Jesus is Judas, if you read it from a metaphysical standpoint. And so, Judas is the satanic, or saturnic, as I call it, aspect of himself, on the astral realm. And so, in the story of Judas, I encourage that, that you, for people who have not read it, I encourage you that you read the Gospel of Judas. But, Jesus is talking about these unconscious aspects of himself and the wheel of the zodiac, because all of his disciples are very pious. One thing about the element of Jesus is pious, is the virtuous aspect of a human being. And so in the Gospel of Judas, he's talking to his disciples, and he's saying to them, because they're doing something pious. I think they're giving offerings to God or something like that. And he says to them, what are you doing? And, he's kind of laughing at them and scoffing at them. And they said, basically they're saying, Lord, why are you making fun of us? We're doing what's proper. And he laughs and he's like, yeah, you are doing what's proper, but this is not because of you. This is because of what your God wants you to do. And so in the Matrix environment, we think that being good is something that's good. But whenever you're being good and doing what the Matrix environment is telling you to do, you're cultivating, you're cultivating archon energy. And so this energy is energy that's a masculine, sexual energy, actually, that is that's angry. And so we call this the id in Freudian psychology, or the inner child in New Age literature. And so he scoffs at them, and he shows them pictures of themselves, really, who they really are in the astral realm. Because I think one of the disciples said that there's a dream that they had. And in the dream, everyone is gathered around an altar, and they invoke Jesus' name. However, these people who invoke the name of Jesus, they participate in all types of lawlessness. And so, these types of lawlessness involve, like, killing their wives and their kids, and having sex with men and stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of debauchery that's going on. And so Jesus reveals that that's them, that they are the ones who are participating in this lawlessness. And so they become angry, and they curse Jesus in their hearts, because really they're not aware that they have these two aspects of themselves. They have an ego, which is the pious feminine aspect, the virtuous aspect. But whenever you're being pious and virtuous and proper and giving thanks to God, there's another aspect of you that is not being honored, and that is reflected on the astral realm. And so at the end of the Gospel of Judas, Judas is closest to Jesus. So you can think of, like, Jesus as Sagittarius, and Judas is Ophiuchus. If you study Nostradamus, he tells you, he says that the end of the world has to do with Ophiuchus, because Ophiuchus is the 13th daemon, or demon. So this is, Jesus has made it his way, all the way through the zodiac. And so he is almost like not human, really. He's almost not human. He's almost purely spiritual. And so whenever you have that imbalance between the masculine and the feminine energy, and you're more spiritual, and Judas is, very saturnic, or what have you, or satanic and material, eventually the kundalini or whatever rises, and he tells you that your horn has been raised and your wrath has been kindled. And so that's when the soldiers come and they take Jesus away. So what is this saying? In Ape Shit, when she says, give me my check, she's talking about Judas. She's talking about Judas. And also, she is, when she says in her video, fast like a Lambo, skeet, 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 she's talking about the whore of Babylon. She is talking about skeet, skeet, skeet is like ejaculation. So, superficially, if you're not looking at this through your pineal gland, you're like, oh, she's talking about a Lamborghini. Fast like my Lambo. No, she's talking about the Lamb of God, which is the whore of Babylon. It says that God slays a lamb for his pleasure in the book of Revelation. That's what she's referring to. And so that's what she's talking about. She's talking about skeet, 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 about a lamb that has been sacrificed for God's pleasure. Skeet, skeet, skeet. She's talking about that lamb selling itself, Jesus selling himself out for some relief because of the relentless mind torture and all those things and gang stalking and things like that he's actually witnessing and enduring the affliction so they can bring in the Antichrist. And so when she says, give me my check, this is even another video. If you look at the video Started for Iggy Azalea, and that video, if you look at the lyrics for Started, she says, girl, you getting a check, you be fronting like brass. She's talking to Christ. She's talking to Jesus. These videos or what have you, they have very cryptic, these lyrics have very cryptic things in them, if you will, to tell you that the check is to bring in the Antichrist, to accept some money so they can bring in King James of Scotland, who is the Antichrist. It's even going back to Ape Shit when he says, Chief Keef meet Rafiki, I think, who been lying king to you. They're talking about King James of Scotland. King James of Scotland has lied to Jesus because Jesus is two people. Jesus is Chief Keef, right, the consciousness, and he is also Rafiki, which is an animal, which is a monkey. Because whenever you're a super duper spiritual as an ego, you're super duper carnal and devilish as an astral. So he's saying that you're about to be nailed to the cross. Chief Keef meet Rafiki. Rafiki is the monkey and the Lion King who been lying king to you. The King James of Scotland has been lying to Jesus. Jesus is the spiritual, and the Rafiki is his devilish self. So Jesus is like, you know what? Sex is awful, whatever. I hate sex. And, sex is wrong and bad, and you should, prostrate yourself for God or whatever the case is. Guess what? Jesus is getting it in on the astral realm with sex, So, he's skeeting all over the place, So the thing about it is that, I say this in jest, and this may offend some people, especially given religion and so forth. But if you actually have somewhat of an open third eye, you will put these connections. That's what the pineal gland does. Whenever you have your pineal gland opened, it looks at these different details and puts the connections between them together. So, videos like Started with, Iggy Azalea, and she talks about, I do it big, like I'm a giant. She's talking about a vagina. This is a drag queen, a dragon. They say Satan is the dragon. King James of Scotland is a drag queen. She says, I do it big like I'm a giant, because she's like, I'm not a giant. I'm not a woman. But once I get rid of Jesus, the pineal aspect of my being, then I will be like a woman. I'm a drag queen. And she even says, like in other songs too, about I'm a giant. No, like she has a vagina. No, you don't have a vagina. You're a man. And so, therefore, since you're a man, you really should be ruled by a woman, because a woman has the pineal capability to provide balance to this reality. But when you're a reptile, you can't provide any balance to it. And so eventually that will, will falter this reality. King James of Scotland will reach a place of stasis. And so he'll be calling for Jesus again to save him from his reptile, filthy, disgusting ways. And so, you know, I have a message for King James of Scotland. You know, either you marry a black woman or you rot in hell. And, you know, that's what you're going to do eventually. And you're going to be calling out for a black woman to come save you. So just like in Beyonce's video, you know, he only wants me when I'm not there. He better call Becky with the good hair. You know, when he has Jesus sell himself out for 30 pieces of silver, just know that you're going to be calling for Jesus again when you're living in hell. And you reach a stasis where you're only functioning by what you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. And nothing, you don't have any love, because Jesus is love. Jesus is love. But King James of Scotland doesn't care about love. He's what we call a sociopath. And so the only thing that he cares about is what he can taste, touch, smell, hear, and see. That's all he cares about, the material. Everything's about the material. It's not about uniting with consciousness. So you can have the balance between the material and the pituitary, you know, I mean the material and the spiritual pineal gland aspect. The two must be brought to one, but he would rather them be separate, and he would rather his consciousness be in separation between a Jesus and a Judas type figure, separation. Either play your pineal or either play your pituitary, going back and forth between the celestial bodies of the moon and of the of the sun. And so in my next video, I'm going to talk a lot more about King James of Scotland and his version of the Bible, and how the Bible is actually designed as a metaphysical weapon to split these two aspects, the moon and the sun, or the conscious or the unconscious, or Isis and Ra, or create Israel, and create Jesus and Judas, if you will. So, you know, I want to go through specific scriptures and things like that. So I totally encourage you to get your Bible out and look at these scriptures, because like I said, when you're hearing scripture, it's different than you reading them. And so when you look at these contradictions, you will see that the Bible itself creates within consciousness, within your conscious awareness, within your mind, to use two aspects of you. And this is actually done, and this goes into the secret society that King James is affiliated with, which is the Freemasons. So thanks guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video.